Absolutely.
All right. Genetics 101 with Ryan Rodimer, our Director of Genetic Education. This was our second, third, third
Third.
in our series. Third. We had the first one was Aorta 101. Our second one was Marfan syndrome. He's still going to talk about a lot of different topics over the next couple of weeks, but this one is about a lesser known but important aortic disorder, which is called Loeys-Dietz syndrome. We're going to talk about this for a little bit, but in his previous article, when he talked about Marfan syndrome, which is likely the most well-known genetic syndrome affecting the body's connective tissue, he actually emphasized the importance of spreading awareness and understanding among not only healthcare providers, but also survivors, families, caregivers dealing with aortic dissection or suspecting Marfan syndrome as an underlying cause. Because remember, you don't have to have had family members before you have Marfan for you to have Marfan. You can be patient X and be the 1st one who you find out you have Marfan syndrome. But in this particular installment, in this week's blog, which is part of the Genetics 101 series, we actually have a chance to learn all about Loeys-Dietz syndrome, or LDS, which is another very important connective tissue disorder. And you can always reach out to Ryan. You should always think aorta, think family. This is part of the discussion, talking about your family medical history. Next one in 2 weeks, we're going to learn about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But what is Loeys-Dietz syndrome? Because they all have a little different nuances. And it is rare. It is a hereditary connective tissue disorder that actually affects the aorta and other body systems. Because people are actually misdiagnosed with LDS, like you see in Marfan syndrome, in part because it's much rarer and it's something that most doctors are actually not very familiar with. Historically, LDS was a condition that was known for having very significant features that were related to the face and the skull. Major orthopedic differences. So it's not a term that physicians throw around or talk about lightly when they're trying to diagnose you. However, what they now know is that some families with LDS, they don't have any of these significant features. It's kind of like with Marfan syndrome, we always thought that people were going to be tall and lanky and long-limbed. That's not necessarily true. There are people that are shorter, stouter, shorter limbed that also have Marfan. But with LDS, they may have only very subtle features or none at all. This actually depends on the genetic mutation that's actually involved. And for this reason, for aortic dissection survivors and their families, understanding Loeys-Dietz syndrome is very important, especially when it comes to non-classical or less severe presentations with few related body findings. So in this article, they're actually going to talk all about LDS, shedding light on the genetic symptoms, diagnosis, management, treatment, and resources for living with this. And what's interesting is that it's named after Dr. Bart Loeys and Dr. Hal Dietz, who is down the road here in Maryland at Hopkins. They were the researchers who first described this disorder back in 2005. And LDS actually affects the body's connective tissue disorders, leading to a variety of problems, including aortic aneurysms, dissections, but also aneurysms and dissections of smaller vessels as well. So there's a lot of information in here as far as how it compares to Marfan syndrome. Again, all of these very specific genetic information and details, the symptoms of LDS, treatment options, and just how you live with Loeys-Dietz syndrome. So don't know if you had a chance to read it. I do not have Loeys-Dietz syndrome, but I found it very, very interesting. And I just find genetics in and of itself extremely fascinating. So yeah, so hopefully you had a chance to check this out. Again, if you have any questions, there's an email in this article where you can direct your questions to Ryan, or you can always send us a question at info@aortichealth.org. Loeys-Dietz. Next up, Ehlers-Danlos.